Israelis cast their ballots today for the second time in 5 months, and several early exit polls suggest Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's re-election plans are falling short. Voters went back to the polls because Netanyahu was unable to form a governing coalition following an April vote. He is a member of the conservative Likud party and a close ally to President Trump. Netanyahu is also being investigated for fraud, bribery, and breach of trust. Those same exit polls have Benny Gantz leading Netanyahu. He represents the more centrist Blue and White Party. He is also a one-time head of the Israeli military. CBS News foreign correspondent Seth Doan is in Tel Aviv with the latest.
We are here at election night headquarters for the Likud party, which is Benjamin Netanyahu's political party. You can see it is still relatively quiet here. That's because some of the very difficult number crunching is taking place right now. The voting is just part of it, but this is a parliamentary system. There are 120 seats in Israel's parliament, the Knesset, and the key number here is 61. That is the number of seats needed to build a coalition or to form a government. So just who might make up that coalition is what is being discussed right now. You can see the world media has turned out. There is a lot of attention on this political process here, which at times has seemed like Benjamin Netanyahu has been on the ticket along with President Donald Trump. There have been huge billboards on the sides of Likud party headquarters showcasing this relationship that Netanyahu has with Trump. The argument, the message being that no one can replace Netanyahu. But his chief competitor toward the center is Benny Gantz, a former Army general who leads the Blue and White Party. They are a little more centrist, a little more secular, and they make the argument that Netanyahu is too corrupt. Now, Netanyahu is facing corruption charges, possible indictments on corruption charges. So this is a fight not only for Benjamin Netanyahu's political life, but also to try to escape some sort of prosecution and possible jail time. Elaine?
Seth Doan, thank you. Joining me from Washington is Ishaan Tharoor. He is a Washington Post foreign affairs and politics reporter. Ishaan, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So the election appears to be too close to call, but I'd like to get some context. Tell us about these two candidates, their backgrounds, and their respective parties.
Right. Well, Netanyahu, of course, as your viewers all probably know at this point, is a long-standing titan of Israeli politics. He's the longest, after the summer, he's become the longest ruling prime minister in Israeli history. He is a really savvy political operator. He has, over the years, really built up a right-wing nationalist base and commands a lot of right-wing support. And then he's going against another figure who is hardly a leftist. Benny Gantz is a former general, but he's hewing a slightly more moderate centrist line. There's a lot of anger in Israel about Netanyahu's perceived corruption. There are ongoing corruption cases. And in part, Netanyahu needs to win re-election in order to hopefully pass, for his sake, hopefully pass legislation that gives him immunity from these ongoing corruption cases. So there's a lot of anger about that. And that's really driven some of the divisions in the election. There are other politics as well. Of course, Israel is a parliamentary system, so you have a whole other set of parties and a whole other set of personalities involved in the arithmetic that will lead to whatever coalition government we see emerging. A major player is another man named Avigdor Lieberman, a former minister in Netanyahu's government who's now seen widely as the kingmaker in whatever emerges after tonight. His party is a right-wing nationalist party, but it's secular. And the important thing there is that because he's very militantly secular, he won't sit in coalition with Netanyahu's more religious right-wing allies on the right. So that means, and Lieberman has just called in the last few minutes, he's called for a unity government between his party, Gantz's party, and Netanyahu's Likud, that freezes out the religious parties, but very importantly, that unity government would not have Netanyahu in it. So of course, as I'm saying right now, it's the permutations, there are many various scenarios that we could see unfurling. The permutations are a bit complicated. Parliamentary politics are always a bit complicated, especially when the margins are so tight.
Yeah, well, for the Washington Post, you wrote, quote, quote, I want to quote you here, many of Israel's supporters in the Washington foreign policy establishment fear that a Netanyahu emboldened by President Trump would confirm a dark reality. What exactly do you mean by this dark reality?
Well, it's a reference to the course of events that we've seen over the last few years, not just while Trump has been in office, but also under Obama. Netanyahu has taken his country farther to the right, and as part of the election campaign, he has promised his supporters to effectively annex parts of the occupied West Bank, and thereby really confirming the end of what we consider to be the two-state solution, that is an independent Palestinian state emerging alongside Israel. Many people for many years have believed that the two-state solution is dead as a real option. Netanyahu is confirming it, essentially by carrying out this annexation. And then the question emerges, and this gets to the question of the dark reality, is that if you have millions of Palestinians living within Israel's borders without any real political rights, the same political rights as Israelis, then the dark reality is that of, yes, the word apartheid. And that's a political realization that you're hearing in Washington as well. There are more lawmakers on the left in this city who are willing to use that word now.
Well, in the meantime, Israel's Attorney General is expected to decide whether to formally charge Prime Minister Netanyahu with corruption. How would a victory for Netanyahu affect that investigation?
Well, it would give Netanyahu the opportunity to ram through legislation through the Knesset that would allow him in his position in the executive to have effective immunity in this situation. It would be incredibly divisive as a move, but it would probably be successful on his part. But the damage it would do to the independence of Israel's judiciary, the rule of law in the country, people are very concerned about that. If he loses, of course, you're going to see another bruising struggle in the media. Netanyahu, like President Trump, has been at odds with the media for quite some time. And so there is a kind of polarization that's set in place as well, and that will, no matter who wins, will sort of deepen in Israeli politics.
So the Trump administration, as you know, plans to release soon an Israeli-Palestinian peace plan. How could the outcome of this election affect the rollout of that plan, if at all?
It's hard to tell. You know, for quite some time, nobody really believed that the Trump administration was going to even release anything until, perhaps even after 2020. There's a lot of cynicism about this peace plan in the region. It has no buy-in from the Palestinians, by and large. So it's really, and everything the Trump administration has done in the last couple of years has been in the service of Netanyahu's, frankly, right-wing agenda. And he's given a lot of concessions to the Israelis and very little to the Palestinians. Or in fact, he's really actually actively hurt the Palestinian position in many ways. So as far as a peace plan, we'll see. You know, if Netanyahu goes off and annexes parts of the West Bank, we'll see how the peace plan fits into that. It certainly won't offer a scenario where a viable Palestinian state is possible.
This is an election with enormous implications. Ishaan, Tharoor, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.